So while everyone is trying to get a seat, I already see that our next speaker is already here. It's a pleasure to have you here, Stephan Kaulbach from Deutsche Bahn. You will talk about a brief history of data traffic at Deutsche Bahn, about the big bangs and black holes, and I'm really excited to see what's behind all of that. You have more than 23 years of experience in the field of IT and digitalization, including 12 years at Deutsche Bahn, and for the next 20 minutes, the stage is yours, and I'm excited to learn more from your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for this nice introduction, and that helps me that I don't have to introduce myself. So at least, as you heard, within the last 20 years, I have a lot of projects regarding digitization. Since the last 3 years, I worked as the head of Data Intelligence Center. What does it mean? I will explain in the next couple of minutes. And yeah, I want to take you with me on a trip about the history about data and artificial intelligence at the Deutsche Bahn. I think it's a quite interesting journey we did the last couple of years. Everything started in 2019, so it is not so far away. So many of you guys maybe started a little bit earlier, but we figured out in 2019 that we have to think about data and AI. Why does it happen? In 2019, we came up with our new strategy, which is called the Strong Rail. And I don't want to boring you with the whole insights of the strategy, but there's one big focus on it, and it's the goal to reach the climatic goals of the German government. So we have one of the big pieces to make the CO2 goals for the German government happen. And how are we able to do that? In the end of the day, it's quite simple. It's a modal shift. So we want to transfer the traffic from the streets to the tracks. And what does mean is that we have to increase our infrastructure. We have to build up new infrastructure. And if you can read in the newspapers, it's quite difficult to do that because you see what happens. But because depart from a car, we cannot move around a construction site. So we have to pass around and think about our time schedule, how to move forward with a construction site. The other thing is we increase our capacity, but means more trains on the tracks. More long-distance trains, more regional trains on the tracks to be able to transport more passengers. And last but not least, we need to optimize our processes, which are more or less because we are a quite old company, which are quite old, and we have to increase or we have to optimize our processes regarding all these new increasing of infrastructure and capacity goals we are facing at. So that brings us to the point that we have to decide we have to do something with data and AI, because we have to help the people in our processes to work with all these new opportunities and things which are happening around them. So there are 3 things we try to reach by using AI and data within our company. The first thing is everything needs to be connected. So we have to link the perspective towards the core processes. Therefore, we came up with a board decision, which means that we have a free data flow within the group, which is a quite huge announcement we made by 2020, that all the data can be used by everyone in the group. The second thing is we want to help the people within the processes to be predictive by seeing what are the information they need to make a decision. So what is the right information they need in this situation to make the proper decision? And the second thing is what is the conclusion of making my decision in the future. So given the precast of what's going on if I make this or that decision, I bring you up some examples later on. And in the end of the day, we want to become more resilient to all these things which are happening around, to be to minimize the interruptions due to effects you can see by everyday base and you can read in the newspaper. So how do we going to get that? We are building up department which is called the Data Intelligence Center, and we have 3 things to do. The first thing, and that's what we call the House of Data, is to make data available, to make data transparency, to make to make visible the things that Deutsche Bahn already knows, because we are a huge company and nobody knows every data we have, and additional, we don't know where the data are and how can they be used and stuff like that. So there are a bunch of questions we have to answer before we can use the data within the group, and therefore we have built up a group which is responsible for doing that, to make data transparent, to make data sharing available. And to make sure that we don't start, or also if we don't have just a governance department, we came up with the idea to have a kind what we call a House of Data, House of AI. Sorry, the House of AI. They are working with the business units to come up with data usage projects. So we are really going in the operations. We are going in and we figure out what is the necessity to help them to make their daily business better by using data and helping them out with AI. So that's the second thing. And the very important part is the third part, and I always call it the glue between all these both houses, are what we call the House of 3C: communication, community, and change. Because in the end of the day, it's not just technology we have to change. It's not just to bringing in AI within the business. It's not just to figure it out what is the right law by using data. It is to take the people with us, to explain to the people why does AI and data usage help them by their daily business, and not by the same way bringing up what we call the glass employee. They are afraid of, oh no, everybody see what I'm doing on. That's not the purpose. And it's also not the purpose to make a glass customer. So we are really looking at how can we improve our operational stuff within the German railway. And that's what we call the Data Intelligence Center, and that's our story we are working on since the last 3 years. And that's what we call our brief history. So as I already mentioned, we started in 2019. And before 2019, we did some slightly projects which we called data ops projects. The people are responsible to figure out, is it helpful to use data within the German railway? And then we came up with a thing we called House of AI that was bring in from our board member to figure out, is AI helpful for the German railway? And after a year of figuring out, we came up with the idea, yes, we have to do something. We have to really do something because it's necessary to achieve our goals. We came up with a strong rail I mentioned in the beginning. In 2020, we came up with what we call the board resolution, added value through data and AI. That I already mentioned in the beginning. So that was a decision that every data is available and it's allowed to use within the group. That is quite important decision by the board, which is necessary for us. Then we came up with at least 15 use cases directly connected to the operations, so that we can really not just say we have to do, but we are really doing it. So we're bringing up the value, we are bringing up the idea of using AI in the company. And in 2021, we came up with what we call a data catalog. So that's the idea to to make data transparent within the group. So to show everybody which data do we have, where how can I achieve it, how can I aim it, and how can I access it. So that's the idea behind the data catalog. And by the end of the last year, we came up what we call the Data and AI Strategy 2.0, which means it's data into action. So after working really 2 years on what's going on in the German railway and what can we do, we started to figure out, so what do we have to focus on? So what are the next steps to bringing really value to the company? And we came up with four points we are figuring out. So first thing is focus on joint processes with impact on punctuality. I think it's quite simple to understand, as I already mentioned several times, so you can see what's going on currently on our operational base. If you're using the trains, you see what's going on. So we have to improve that. We have really to improve that, and we need to think about what can we do with data and AI to improve the situation we are currently facing at. The second thing is we have to look at the product-oriented organizational model. What does that mean? I think my speakers already mentioned it. So we have to think at data as a product. So we don't have to think. We have to really use the data into the middle point of the thinking. So how can we use the data? What is data using for? We came up from a world where we look always on the application and nobody cares about the data the application is being handled at. And suddenly we changed this mindset. We said, no, not the application is in the center of thinking, but the data which are processed within the application. And suddenly we changed the thinking. And that's why we changed this behavior. The third thing is a quite interesting thing because we have to scaling up ourselves and quite heavily. Within the last 3 years, we created a huge demand on using data. So the many business units may see what is the benefit of using data, what is possible to use data and to use artificial intelligence. So we get a lot of requests of, can you help us? Can you do projects with us? So we have to scale up our ability to deliver projects, and therefore we came up with the idea of an AI factory. And the third thing is, in the end of the day, it's quite the architectural part. It's the group-wide standardization of platforms, reuse data projects. It's focusing on standardization. It's necessary as well. So later on this day, my colleague Carsten Fritsche will hold a speech regarding the data mesh for DB. So I just will introduce it here quite fastly. So because we decided within the last year that we focus on a data mesh approach of going in with data architecture, data products and stuff like that. It is because we are quite heterogeneous group. So we are quite, every business unit has its own goals, has its own KPI system. So we are not able to, and we are not willing to have one big data lake within the DB group. So we have to facing the situation that we have a decentral federal system of data handling, of data usage. But in the end of the day, we want to combine it. We want to make sure that data sharing, data usage is possible about the whole group, and therefore we figured out after a lot of research that the data mesh approach is quite the right thing of being here successful of bringing up a group-wide usage of data. As I already mentioned, my colleague will come up with more details later in this day. Then some examples for our projects, and just for the simple one, we have 3 things we are looking at. So the first thing is planning the time schedule, planning construction sites. So that's one of our issue we are facing on, and therefore that's one of our current major projects we are facing of how can we improve the construction site situation, how can we improve the time schedules which are necessary due to the construction sites, and therefore we are using a lot of data science and AI methods of bringing this alive. Then the second big thing is what we call it's during the execution. So if a train is already running, then we have a situation which is called disposition. So there are people in our company which are responsible to decide what is the next step for the trains to go to, and therefore we came up with a solution where the disponent can, like a video stream, can move forward and can look in the future which are the consequences of his decision in this dispositioning process. So he can really see what is the best decision of making the situation in this train schedule better in the current situation. And that's already, all these things are live in production, so that's not just projects, they are really in production working. And the third thing is to analyze, to identify, so what we call after the train is already drive. So we are trying to figure out what are situations as we are evaluating the information we are getting from the trains regarding the infrastructure, regarding whatever happens during the train drive. So we are reading out all this information we are getting from the trains to figure out, are there any situations we can handle for the next train drive to be better on that. And all of this together, so that's what we call the digital brain for the DB. So we are wanting to become better and better and become more effective for our customers. So now I can have a look on the time clock, and I see I just have a couple of seconds. So I just want to go to this Big Bang versus black holes. So what are the black holes or the situations we are facing at? So one of the things was engineering or technology. So therefore we get, in the last 3 years, we get a lot of buzzwords. So we have to really think about all these situations, which is a real cool technology, which is a real technology which can be used within our group, because it's quite, we are quite huge company, we are quite heterogene group, so we have to figure out which is the right technology for us. So technology is one thing we have to focus on. The second thing is the organizational stuff. As I already mentioned, we are a federated system, so we don't have a situation like, for example, AWS or other big, especially US companies. So we are more or less facing as a federal situation where every business unit is provided by himself. And the most important thing, as you already can mention, is the human being itself. So we have to bring them with us. We have to make transparency to think what is the culture, what does it mean of sharing data for the individuum, and that's why we decided in the very beginning, as I already mentioned, that we put in a whole department within our group, which is just focusing on the human being, because this one is one of our major things we have to look at to be successful. So, yes, thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you get some ideas how the German Railway focus on this issue, and I have to hand over to my next speaker. Oh, here.
First of all, thank you very much, and a round of applause.